Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. Welcome back to another episode of League Unlocked. Eric and Mark here with you, and we're doing a little countdown today, gearing up, warming up for the latest and greatest of the World Championship. We're going through a bittersweet list because, number one, you're looking at some of the best players of all time in the history of the game, but you're looking at those guys who have not been able to capture the ultimate title. Yes, we are looking at the best players to never win a world championship.
I think that you can take these 9 players that make this list of the players that haven't won a world championship, and you could throw them into the top 20 players of all time list. That's how good these guys are in League of Legends, and just how unfortunate they are not to have crossed that finish line, taken the final nexus that everybody wants to end the year on as world champion.
And we begin this list. Obviously, there's some guys even outside of these 9 who you could mention. Guys like BDD, guys like Score, who have been around or were around for a long time. But we begin with one of the OGs, Mr. Prey in the bot lane. Obviously, he's already got some iconic world championship moments. But when you're looking at this list, you're taking into account how high has the ceiling been? Have they even been in the conversation for best in their role? Have they actually had deep runs at the World Championship? And our boy Prey, of course, has the craziest stat of only losing at Worlds to the eventual champions.
Oh man, it hurts so bad. Prey kicks off this list, and yes, there's the first stinger. It is the guy that has always lost to the eventual champion at the Worlds event. Prey. What can you say? Of course, you mentioned it out, and everybody is, whether you actually know about Prey or you don't, you know the Ash clip because you've seen that anytime an international event or Worlds rolls around, they're showing that one from one of the most exciting, one of the most hype, one of the most clutch plays in League of Legends history is that Ash arrow. Rock Tigers, love that one. And then, of course, you go through the rest of his career, and you're right. Prey does make a lot of appearances at these international events and does actually perform relatively well, but it just is that one where you're always had the winner at your side of the bracket and always lined up against him.
Even going back to season 2, Taipei Assassins he's losing to, and then obviously a lot of SKT thrown in there, but pretty much any of these international events you could throw in MSI as well. This isn't an MSI topic, but he was pretty much a top 3 AD carry at most of the events, except for maybe the Longzhou one, where they disappointed in 2017. But for the most part, incredibly consistent. And a guy who was very consistent, a buddy of his as well on this list, is Mr. Smeb. Reason we got him higher, even though he was at less world championships, he was legit best in his role at a couple events, and not just best in his role, but arguably right there with Faker in terms of best player on the planet.
Prey was excellent. Prey was an important part and contributor to a lot of the successes that went on for his team. Smeb was a different beast. Smeb, during his prime of the LCK, was one of the most dominant forces that we have ever seen in League of Legends. One of the best, one of my favorites. Smeb, unfortunately, finds himself on this type of list, not capturing a world championship, but pulling together a very impressive career, a lot of good numbers. Of course, the big plays everyone's remembering. We're going back on them. How about some Rumble games up in that top side? My man burning through some players. Love Smeb up in there.
And you can, similar to Prey, you can talk about losing to eventual champions because that's exactly what he did. Back-to-back SKT losses, obviously made it to a world final, and then 2018, even though they bowed out early, it was that absolutely ludicrous series against IG, who eventually went on to win the whole thing too.
Which, that was one of the craziest things I've ever got to experience in my life, is getting late to that matchup and having it already had started, and I get there just as the base race is happening for that one between the two of them, 1 pixel away from going the other way. Yes, this was a heck of a series, and eventually losing to IG. For Smeb, the dominance that he showed, again, remembering there was a period when people would talk about, of course, the hype of Faker, the peak of Faker before he had ever lost a world championship. People were talking about Smeb as the player to watch heading into the 2016 Worlds and what could happen for them fantastic player. One that I think one of the things that we got to recognize and acknowledge with that one, with all the not talk about SKT later being the one to be that team that damns him all the time, he didn't go to the other side. Other players from KT said, yeah, let me get some of this SKT treatment. Smeb was
he made his own super team to take him down.
He said all along, I will not be joining SKT. I am repping strong for KT, so I got to give him some props on that one.
And, some of the guys who went to SKT didn't end up getting a world championship with them. Spoilers, we might talk about them later on this list. Now we got a newer kid on the block on this list, and that one's been around for half a decade now at this point, but we are talking about the golden left hand Knight in the mid lane, even though only the last couple years we've really seen this level of dominance where he's been racking up LPL title after LPL title. There's no question over the last 4 years or so we've been talking about Knight as one of the best mid laners on the entire planet. He's never been to a finals at Worlds, gotten to a semis, and gotten to the quarterfinals, but pretty much both of those series were upset losses.
Now, this either says something about the LCK and LPL schedule differences. But when you look back on Smeb and Prey's careers, they're hovering around the 300 or 350 type of wins over the course of their career. You go to someone like Knight, and we instantly step that up to about 500 and something, even with the less amount of time that he has professionally played compared to some of these old heroes that we are talking about. But make no mistake, Knight is a winner and eventually should be a world champion winner, but not today, not right now. He finds himself on this list, occupying the best players never to have won a world championship, because he is one of the best players around and hanging out there, and what he does in the LPL. It doesn't matter. My man is a mercenary assassin. He can do it on one team. He can go to a squad the next year and be that same key difference maker that pushes you to the very front of the competitive scene of the LPL.
And I think the reason Knight partially isn't higher on this list is the expectations in his early years were not there to be making noise at Worlds, because he was on some bad top eSports rosters where he was a standout highlight world-class player, but the other four guys, no, not so much.
No. Yeah, and when you do look at it, I think this is one where Knight is almost undone by those international performances, where he could have found himself even higher on this list without getting that ultimate prize to get out of this list with a world championship win. That's where you look at this one for Knight and you acknowledge even with some of those poor top esports teams, his performance necessarily wasn't also to the level that we have talked about. We have seen at the domestic scene when you step to that international stage. That's, I think, the next thing that people are looking for with Knight. And after this year, MSI, EWC, I think a lot of us have seen the little glimpses that we want to see, that pressure and power that he exerts domestically on the international stage. Only a matter of time. I'm calling it before Knight finds himself out of this list.
The evolved form of Smeb, the next generation Smeb, is number 6 on this list, and that is King Khan in the top lane. Been to Worlds with multiple teams, Longzhu, SKT, and then the closest he was to that elusive world championship in his actual swan song was 2021. He got to the finals with Dom1. He was getting pentakills. He looked like one of the best top laners at the tournament. Came up just short against EDG, but this was one of the most exciting top laners to watch for, a 4-year stretch?
We'll talk about the personal side in just a second, but obviously, number one, got to talk about the on-Rift performances from Khan, because you laid it out. This almost felt like Smeb Plus. This is like, when the iPhone comes out with the iPhone, 4S or, 4S, that's old now.
Damn, we're going way back.
But you put it on the, little S on the side. That's kind of how it felt like with what Khan was, an evolution of that dominant topside force for the LCK, what he could represent. Did it all the way throughout his career. Again, maybe another guy that you could slap on the mercenary tag that was willing to go around and get the job done for whoever he was signing up for on the year. And then we get to talk about the personal side. I want to mention this one important with Khan because, yes, he laid out the unfortunate bittersweet end to his career that falls in that game 5 for Damwon. And he's the guy yucking it up after the event, trying to keep his young brothers into a positive mindset about this whole experience and not let it be soured by a down moment as he moved on into his military service of his career, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure is done. My boy is going to be out of there pretty soon. Maybe still some time left on the con clock to take another kick at the can, getting out of this list.
Come in as a coach and grab that title like so many of these other legends of the game are doing. But yeah, obviously so many different eras, different metas we saw him thrive at. I know he had some trash talk that ended up backfiring, especially on the King Zone, but playing Quinn top for SKT whenever a carry option was available, you know that Khan was going to be the guy to pilot it. And again, one of the most exciting top laners that we'd have the pleasure of seeing over these years. Ahead of him in that 5 spot is the only Western guy on this list, and the conversation for GOAT in the West is so far gone and seems like it will be never matched. Of course, we're talking about Mr. Claps in the mid lane, who is a rare example of having insane hype coming into the scene as a rookie. And my man not only lived up to it, he completely smashed it. How about since this format change in the LEC where he can farm titles, he's got 14 domestic titles, Mark.
He is straight up Stardew Valley farming the LEC right now. Prime harvest season for Caps. Yes, Caps Claps finds himself on this list, unfortunately. One of the best players, undoubtedly in my mind, in the history of League of Legends, one of the most impactful and, unquestioned leader of the Western scene, as you laid out, but no ultimate title, unfortunately, for Caps. I think a lot of us can look back to 2019, was it? That would have been the year for G2.
They were favorites. People forget they were favorites going into that FPX matchup in finals before they got absolutely smacked.
And I think anyone with any revisionist history afterwards even getting smacked in that series, G2 should have been the world champion. That's how it should have laid out. Things don't fall out that way. If that's how it worked, a lot of these guys aren't on this list. They're off of this list, but that's where you find yourself. Already talked about Knight, and he is someone that dominates the LPL. Well, welcome to the guy that dominates the LEC right now, and that's Caps, and he still is without a world championship, just like your boy Knight.
And time again, he's one of the few Western players we talk about not just matching up, but we've seen him smurf on Korean and Chinese mid laners on the biggest stage multiple times. And, he's going to be the only Western guy to go back-to-back World Finals on 2 different teams. There's so many stats that you feel like this guy has that will be absolutely unreachable. Hopefully, being a first Western player to win Worlds, or first team. He's the guy who deserves it. 4 spot ahead of him, another newer guy, but now it's actually been half a decade and kind of in the same conversation as Knight. But the reason Chovy is a little bit higher is because just the individual level, it feels like multiple years now where he's at worst one of the 3 best players on the planet.
How does this list have 3 of the dominant forces in League of Legends right now? The three heads that lead their regions. You're talking about Knight in the LPL, Caps in the LEC, and Chovy for the LCK, and all 3 of them no world championship titles. I got a feeling that's gonna change mighty quick. Starting as soon as this year, might as well keep running all the next couple of years, because I don't see any way that anyone else is winning worlds other than these 3 pretty much. Is gotta be the ticket. Chovy is the one we are talking about, and that means it is the Gen G domination. There's there's a window to talk about the early parts of his career, on real life, and how things developed for Chovy, but you can immediately jump to the Gen G era of domination and success to look at why he is on a list like this and what type of player that he is destined, surely going to fulfill in the future, to be off of a list like this.
And I know people, especially the Gen G era, the last couple of years at Worlds, they're always labeling chokey for Gen G, especially at Worlds. But how about some praise for dragging teams that had no business being at Worlds, let alone top 8, because my man never fails to make it to the next round, dragging some bottom feeder LCK teams to get there.
That is kind of the important part to mention as well. And I think it's one of the ones you mentioned when you're talking about Knight as before, is that there were a couple times where we're starting to get these first 1-2 appearances from them at these international events, where ones where maybe they're ready to have that challenge to take that test of the international event. The rest of their squad, the rest of the team certainly was not at that next type of level. That's an important one to keep track of with a player like Chovy. But right now, what has happened for him, and then again, the recency of a little bit of a boost internationally from MSI performance, that's where you can have some more confidence in someone like Chovy and what he can finish off with.
We roll into the top three now, and this is consistency, longevity being the big thing to talk about. These are guys who have had ample opportunities to win worlds, and time again have been competitive squads that you're expecting to make deep runs. We start with Mr. Xiao Hu, who even in the quote-unquote twilight years of his career, he's making his first world finals last year with Weibo. He's clutching it out to get back. He's the only three-time MSI champion, alongside his buddy Ming, who was there with him. But Xiao Hu is just synonymous with the World Championship, even more so than RNG. It's just seeing him there.
Oh, it's so unfortunate, the exchange rate, that you can't change over 3 MSI champion trophies for the one world championship.
Seems like you should get at least one, right? That seems fair.
There gotta be some type of exchange rate here, but yes, Xiao Hu finding himself here, one of the most exciting, most premier, long-standing members of the LPL that we have had the privilege to watch over our careers. Xiao Hu, what can you say about him throughout all the eras, all the RNG time, and now on to Weibo Gaming? Multiple chances to have been on the team that has that run. I think even if you go back to that Worlds in China, when you go back and you go to the semifinals against SKT, 5 Galio games for Faker, that could have been the trip. You go up against a Samsung Galaxy that was so ready only for T1 on the other side. You could have been something different on that final stage. That could have been the one. You could go to Weibo Gaming most recently, and maybe they keep that lightning in a bottle, find a way to get against the T1 force that was last year. But it's always never meant to be for Xiao Hu, the perennial runner-up to Faker's championships, the other edge of the LPL.
It's unfortunately a theme for many of these guys on this list, is running into that SKT wall, denying them so many opportunities at a World Championship. But, I mean, he's pretty much done it all at Worlds, says Xiao Hu. He's bowed out in groups. He's made it to quarters of bench. He's made it to semis. He's made it to finals. So maybe 2024 is the year, the miracle run, where he gets that elusive World Championship to bring back home to the LPL. We talked about Smeb. We've talked about Prey, the final Rocks Tigers member you have to talk about. Since Smeb and Prey, they've long since retired. This guy's 5 years plus later still winning LCK titles. Of course, we're talking about Peanut. He's been to Worlds with Rocks, T1, LGD, had the LPL stint, Gen G, potentially Hanwha Life. This guy has, maybe nobody has more of an up-down career than Peanut has had.
Peanut has had a lifetime of experiences all across League of Legends. He's the type of guy that you'd love. Let's grab some sushi and a beer and have a chat and go through that whole story. My man, it is incredible. The longevity has been there, and it almost doesn't feel like it's been that long for a guy like Peanut. And I think that's because we were so used to seeing him so young, so small, so little at the beginning of his career all those years ago. My man has carved himself out through those ups and downs of his career into an incredible veteran jungler in the LCK right now. The command and consistency that he has provided, 600 plus wins in his career. My man is an incredible force to be respected from the LCK. Unfortunately, finds himself on this list, never finding success with any of those squads that you laid out, or all the way through the ups and downs of his career before he is where he is now with Hanwha Life. But you go back to 2017, the year that was supposed to be another World Championships, cashed in for T1, hot off the backs of already beating Samsung Galaxy in the World Championship. Peanut and SKT come up short in the championship in China, and that is as close as Peanut would ever get.
But what a graceful change into being that veteran supportive leader as opposed to that upstart rookie world-class mechanic type fella that he was on the Rocks Tigers. He's still not the last guy on this list, though. That honor still goes to Uzi. Years retired still, but when you start your career with back-to-back finals with 4 completely different members around you, and for the better part of a decade, you are regarded as the second best player in the world the whole time. Yes, Uzi's number 1 on this list.
It's one of these ones where you say, take Faker from the mid lane, throw him in the ADC role, and unfortunately, don't win any world champ.
That's the big caveat.
That's kind of the way it goes. You can slot in as many of those MSI, LPL trophies as you want, because there's a lot of them. You're going to have to make room for them if you're talking about a guy like Uzi and his trophy case. But there is an empty spot, and that empty spot is the World Championship. You can go through, of course, the early years of Uzi as you laid out those 4 finals, and you can pick any one of those ones to find a World Championship for him. Then you can go to the rebound era, the new era, where he came back. Not necessarily his own individual performance that was going to be the thing that was going to be a world championship, one maybe could hitch a ride to a hot squad that had the makings to push that far. Not the case for Uzi. Unfortunately, any time, never was the time for him to become the world champion. But make no mistake, you look through any of these statistical numbers, any numbers that you ever want to look through to find something on a player, Uzi is going to be near that forefront of it all time.
And still, 4-5 years since he, retired the first time, and still unmatched in terms of just fan base and level that he brought. He is still the closest hype man that we've had to Faker in terms of just world-class mechanics and must-see games to get on the Rift. So still number 1 on this list. But that is it today for Lega Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Wonderful people as always. We love you for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.